Welcome to Two Beans in a Pod. Today we're going deep
Okay.
into the ideas of Federico Faggin.
Faggin.
You've shared some fascinating material with us.
Yes.
Excerpts from his book Irreducible
Right.
and a YouTube interview titled Quantum Information Panpsychism Explained.
Yeah.
Our mission is to unpack these concepts and see what resonates with you.
I think that's a great goal.
Someone who's curious about gaining knowledge quickly and thoroughly,
Yes.
and who appreciates those aha moments
Sure.
without feeling overwhelmed.
Definitely.
So what really stood out to me was how personal
Yeah.
Faggin's exploration into consciousness actually is.
Uh-huh.
He describes this really powerful experience at Lake Tahoe in 1990.
Right.
A profound experience of energy, love, and light emanating from him,
I think that must have been incredible.
leading to a realization of being both the observer and the observed.
Yeah, and that's a theme that comes up a lot in his work, isn't it?
Yeah, this intense personal event sparked his investigation into consciousness.
Like, it wasn't an abstract philosophy thing. It was a real lived experience that shifted his entire perspective.
Exactly.
Which I think makes it even more compelling.
Yeah, and from that pivotal moment,
Mm-hmm.
he began to formulate his theories.
Right.
And I think the central one
Yeah.
is Quantum Information Panpsychism,
QIP.
QIP.
It's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful, but at its heart,
Yeah.
QIP proposes a pretty radical idea, doesn't it?
It really does. He's basically arguing that consciousness and free will aren't just byproducts
Right.
of complex arrangements of matter.
Like an afterthought.
Yeah, more like they're fundamental,
Right.
irreducible properties of nature,
Yeah.
just as fundamental as gravity.
Or electromagnetism.
Or electromagnetism, exactly.
Yeah.
He even goes so far as to say that mathematics,
Ooh.
which we often think of as this objective language of the universe, is actually created by consciousness,
Right.
not the other way around.
So it's like he's turning our conventional understanding on its head.
Yeah, completely.
We tend to think of matter as primary,
Right.
giving rise to consciousness and mathematics as this universal tool to describe it all.
Exactly. And he's saying no consciousness is there from the start.
It's fundamental.
Almost like it's weaving reality into existence.
Yeah.
And this perspective really seems to align with some interpretations of quantum physics.
Oh, absolutely. And he talks a lot about
Yes.
that holistic view of reality.
Yes, he's very much against a purely deterministic and reductionistic worldview.
So the idea that everything can be broken down into smaller and smaller parts
Exactly like a machine.
and explained by simple cause and effect.
Yeah, just a chain of reactions with no room for anything else.
He even suggests
Yeah.
that this desire
Mm-hmm.
for a deterministic model might stem from a need for power and control.
Oh, that's interesting.
Like if we can understand everything as a machine,
Yeah.
we can control it.
Right. Control and predict.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if maybe our scientific paradigms are influenced by our human desires.
It really does.
More than we'd like to admit sometimes.
Absolutely. And speaking of control,
Yeah.
Faggin also has some pretty strong views
He does.
on artificial intelligence.
Which is a hot topic these days.
Very hot topic. But he doesn't see AI as the next big leap
No.
in understanding ourselves, does he?
Not at all. In fact, he thinks it's quite the opposite.
Oh, really?
He believes that real paradigm shifts come from a fundamental change in understanding who we are.
Our consciousness.
Yes, the nature of consciousness itself.
Hmm.
He sees AI as a tool.
A very sophisticated tool.
Absolutely, but still just a tool.
Yeah.
It can help us, but he doesn't think it can ever truly surpass human capabilities
Especially in areas like creativity.
and comprehension.
Yeah.
He argues that even if an AI generates something novel, it's still humans who recognize and understand its value.
It's that spark.
Yeah, that spark of creativity and
Yeah.
true understanding that he sees as uniquely human.
And this seems to tie into his ideas
It does.
about the purpose of life, which he also explores.
He does. He suggests that at its core, the purpose of life is about self-discovery.
But not in isolation.
Right. It's through our interactions.
A relationship.
Exactly, through knowing each other.
And we truly come to know ourselves.
And this includes confronting our shadow areas.
Those parts of ourselves we might want to hide.
Yeah, the parts we might not like to admit are there.
Yeah, and he even proposes that cooperation,
Yes.
stemming from a direct experience of our interconnectedness, is the fundamental game of life.
The driving force.
Okay, so let's unpack some of these ideas a bit further.
Okay.
He talks about information quite a bit,
He does.
especially in the context of living organisms.
Right.
How does he define or differentiate information?
Well, he starts by going back to the roots of the word,
Okay.
tracing it back to the Latin informa.
Meaning to give shape to something.
Exactly. And he points out that even though we use the word information all the time,
Especially now in the digital age.
constantly,
Yeah.
a precise definition is surprisingly elusive.
That's interesting.
He talks about Claude Shannon's concept of information,
Okay.
which is central to information theory and computer science.
Mhm.
Shannon focused on the accurate transmission of symbols.
So basically getting the message from point A to point B.
Precisely, without any errors.
So for Shannon, it's all about the reliability of the signal.
Yes.
Not what the signal actually means.
Right, he's not concerned with the content, just the delivery.
Interesting.
And Faggin argues that this only captures a small part of what we understand as information.
Because it leaves out meaning.
Exactly, and crucially, it omits subjective experience.
Like what it feels like to receive that information.
Exactly.
Interesting.
And this is where he introduces the concept of live information,
Okay.
particularly in the context of living organisms. He says that the clear separation we see in computers,
Like hardware, software power sources.
yeah,
Don't exist in the same way in a living cell.
right. In a living cell, a single molecule can be a building block, an energy source, and carry information all at once.
So it's all interconnected.
Deeply interconnected.
It constantly changes.
Exactly. It's dynamic.
Yeah.
He emphasizes that we can't understand life by just studying it as a bunch of inert physical objects.
Right, like little machines.
Yeah. He says, for Faggin, consciousness and free will are fundamental and play a crucial role in how live information operates.
So in a computer,
Yes.
the data is separate from the processing unit, which is separate from the power source.
Right.
But in a living cell, it's all happening together.
All at once, yeah.
And this leads him to question the idea that consciousness just emerges
Out of nowhere.
out of non-conscious matter.
Yes, he finds that idea very difficult to accept.
Yeah, like how can something that doesn't have any conscious qualities
Right.
suddenly produce consciousness?
It's a big jump.
He uses the analogy of electrical charge.
Right.
You wouldn't expect electrical charge to suddenly appear.
Out of thin air.
Yeah, in particles that have no underlying charge.
Exactly. So how could subjective experience, that inner feeling of consciousness,
Yeah,
just pop out of matter that has no such inner life?
that's the point.
This leads him to consider panpsychism.
Richard.
The idea that some form of consciousness,
Hmm.
maybe a tiny quantum of consciousness,
Okay.
is fundamental to reality itself.
So not emerging, but always there.
Exactly, built into the fabric of existence.
And this brings us back to
QIP.
QIP, his quantum information panpsychism theory.
Right.
So how does he connect those ideas?
Well, this is where things get really interesting.
Right.
He proposes that a conscious experience,
Like what we're doing right now.
exactly, can be represented by what physicists call a pure quantum state.
Okay.
And one of the key things about a pure quantum state is that it's private and it cannot be perfectly copied.
So it's unique.
Completely unique.
And it can't be replicated.
Exactly. And he argues that this mirrors our conscious experience.
Like my experience of this conversation is mine alone.
You can describe it to me.
But I can't give you the exact experience.
That's a great analogy.
So to explain this further, he uses the term say it
Okay.
to describe a self-conscious entity with free will.
So a Seitie is not just aware?
No, it's aware of its own awareness.
Whoa.
And it can direct its awareness.
It has agency.
Exactly.
Okay.
And he contrasts this with thought forms,
Okay.
which might have some level of consciousness.
But not self-awareness.
Right. They might be aware, but they don't have a sense of I.
So a Seitie is conscious and knows it and can act,
Yeah,
while a thought form is conscious but more passive.
like a plant, maybe?
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it.
And then he brings in quantum entanglement,
Okay.
which is a really strange phenomenon.
Yeah, it's like these particles are connected.
Instantaneously, no matter how far apart they are.
And he sees this as evidence
Yeah,
that things aren't predetermined.
exactly. He says classical states with fixed properties can't exist before a quantum measurement. So there's this inherent openness,
Yeah, and unpredictability at the quantum level.
and that's where free will comes in.
Right. If everything was already set in stone.
There would be no choice.
Exactly.
So he's saying the universe isn't a deterministic machine.
No, he sees it as constantly and creatively becoming.
Okay.
And he even questions the nature of space-time itself.
Space-time.
Yeah, the fabric of reality as we understand it.
That seems pretty fundamental.
I know, right? But he suggests it might be a kind of projection.
A projection.
Yeah, from our embodied consciousness as it perceives a much larger reality.
So like a shadow.
Yes, exactly, like a shadow of a higher dimensional object.
And this larger reality.
Exists in what physicists call Hilbert space.
And that's where Seities and other conscious entities exist.
And interact.
So the physical world we experience.
Is like an interface to this deeper reality.
Of consciousness and information.
Exactly.
That's a mind-blowing idea.
It is.
And it leads him to a pretty important point.
About how we study reality. He says that we've made a big mistake.
What's that?
We've mistaken the symbols we use to describe reality.
For reality itself.
Exactly. We've become so focused on the math and the physical stuff.
That we've lost sight of consciousness.
And subjective experience.
And he emphasizes that we are not machines.
We are conscious fields of awareness.
Yeah.
He says that machines are just symbolic representations of life.
So we've been looking at the map.
Instead of the territory.
And forgetting that we're part of the territory.
Exactly.
And this ties into his ideas about ideas and inventions.
It does. He stresses that ideas always come before their physical manifestation.
So every invention starts with an idea.
Yes, a conscious idea.
And then we use symbols, language, and materials
to bring it into being.
So he uses this to question the idea of the first living cell.
Arising purely by chance.
With no intentionality.
Right. He suggests it was more likely the result of the collective creativity
of Seities,
of those fundamental conscious entities.
If these ideas are resonating with you,
and you're finding this deep dive into the work of Federico Faggin, thought-provoking.
Please hit the like button and subscribe to Two Beans in a Pod for more explorations like this. So Faggin also offers his perspective on the purpose of life.
Which we touched on earlier.
Right, but he goes deeper into the idea of shadow areas.
Those parts of ourselves we tend to hide.
And he suggests that these might exist.
In a more abstract form.
And what he calls one.
The totality of existence.
Like imperfections are part of the whole.
Yes, even in the grand scheme of things.
Interesting. And he talks about different ways of knowing.
Right. He identifies conventional knowing.
The knowledge we share as a society.
Exactly. And then there's mechanical knowing.
The kind of learning our brains and machines do.
And then finally, direct knowing.
Which is more intuitive and emotional.
Yes, experiential.
And he argues that true understanding comes from integrating all three.
It's not just about the facts.
It's about feelings and intuition, too.
Exactly.
It's the whole picture.
And finally, he talks about the evolution of scientific thought.
How new ideas are often resisted at first. And then eventually accepted. He encourages us to reconsider our reliance on purely mechanistic models.
And logic.
To really understand our true nature.
And the nature of reality itself.
He cautions that by disconnecting from these fundamental aspects of our humanity.
We risk becoming too much like the machines we create.
So as we conclude this deep dive into the ideas of Federico Faggin, we hope you've gained some intriguing insights.
And those valuable aha moments.
We've covered his personal journey into consciousness.
His quantum information panpsychism theory.
His views on AI, the nature of information.
The role of consciousness and free will.
And his perspective on the purpose of life.
It's a lot to take in.
It is, but what stands out to you?
What questions has this raised for you?
Faggin's work challenges conventional scientific thinking.
And invites us to consider a reality where consciousness is primary.
If you enjoyed this discussion
and want to continue exploring such profound ideas,
please hit the like button and subscribe to Two Beans in a Pod.
We love bringing you these deep dives
that respect your time and curiosity.
Thank you for listening to Two Beans in a Pod.
If you are interested in the book,
please order it from the link below.